Hey there, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to today's Fireside Chat. First of all, happy November. Hope everyone had an incredible October. Today's segment is a very important one. We are talking about the elections and the importance of voting and the power of your voice. And this is going to be a segment that we really want you to lean in and to really take notes, to engage in, and to share with us your feedback. We have an incredible guest with us, my colleague, Mitra, who is going to be sharing with us with her expertise and her background in civic engagement and helping women candidates run for office. She'll also be shedding light on what's to come in our upcoming elections. We are now 5 days from one of the most important days of our year, essentially. And so we'll talk about what that means. We hope that this fireside chat inspires and empowers you in new ways to get involved in your local community and to really leverage the power of your voice. Mitra, I am super excited to have you. Welcome again. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. It's an honor to join you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation. This is an exciting time.
Same. Okay, so Mitra Salasel is the former director of communications at Ideas 42, which is a global nonprofit that uses behavioral science to solve complex social and policy problems across a range of issues. During her decade in the field, Mitra co-founded Behavioral Sciences magazine and is currently an advisor to the editorial board. Mitra is a veteran of electoral politics. She spent years crafting communication strategies and messaging for high visibility electoral campaigns and political action committees in Texas. Her work was largely focused on narrowing the gender representation gap at all levels of the political process through identifying, training, and supporting women candidates. Mitra is currently an MPA candidate, as I am, at the Harvard Kennedy School. Guys, she's absolutely incredible. So again, welcome, Mitra. Anything I left out, feel free to jump in and fill in.
Thank you. No, listening to you read my bio, I sound like such an incredible person. I'd love to meet her. No, thank you. That was perfect. It's it's great to be in such good company as colleagues at the Kennedy School in the MPA program.
100%. I also was reminiscing on a moment that we shared at the Women in Policy group, a small event we had where you just spoke of your passion, and I could remember your love for this work. And so it's not just a career, but it really is something that sounds very dear to who you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's jump into that. Let's jump into your why, Mitra. You've been doing this work for quite some time. What spun you into this work? What's your why? Why'd you get started?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, I am the child of immigrants, and growing up in the United States, I think at the time that I did, kind of being across different cultures in the US really made it clear that, surprise, society is full of inequities. And so from a very young age, I was motivated to try and use my voice where I could to help others, or where I couldn't use my voice, I would bump up against kind of the guardrails and make a little bit of trouble, and try and find ways to change what felt like those limitations. And so I actually started on the political track like very young. Studied political management in school, got funneled right into a PAC that focuses on increasing women's representation. Being a woman, that seemed like one of the areas that was kind of most ripe for significant systemic change that I felt that I could actually make a difference. So my why essentially is to use my experience and my skills to help change the way that policy is executed in the United States, who makes policy, whose voices are heard at the table, what even gets on the agenda. And I'm here at the Kennedy School to try and think about ways to shift the balance of power kind of on a generational level. Because as you mentioned, Shaniqua, this is a decisive election, one of the most kind of important of our lifetime. But to me, what's concerning is that the last few elections have been the elections of our lifetime. And that's a very volatile, unstable, and frankly, kind of scary place to be in. So I'm interested in finding ways to help shift kind of the policy conversation and narratives around democracy, and finding ways to unite people on a generational time frame so that every single election is not, the election of our lifetime, essentially.
I love that, Mitra. It's so well spoken, and I love what you said from the very beginning. Your why and what got you into this work, being very personal. Your parents who were immigrants, and you firsthand realizing that there are inequities and biases in the systems that we live in, and then having the boldness and the courage to sort of disrupt those systems. I would love to hear about a moment when you did that, but also, yes, speaking to this should not essentially be just the election of our lifetime, but all the previous elections were. And to add to that, your local elections, right? Our local elections also should be sort of framed as very important elections of our lifetime, because it does determine our quality of living, our quality of life, our day to day. And we don't always see it as that, right? Those local city council or state elections are just as important.
Yeah, exactly.
So, if you don't mind, just you can indulge me for a moment, Mitra. If you can share a moment when you
Sure.
remember challenging the system and disrupting the system, what happened and what was that moment like for you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think most specifically when I was younger, uh, I think actually, sorry,
Yeah,
that's a tough one to think of specifically. Do you mind if we um, go to some? I'm sorry.
yeah,
Is it is this like a continuous thing, or are we like able to
yeah,
edit out stuff?
yeah.
Okay.
I think so. I think I've
Okay.
been kidding. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So we can skip over that one. Okay, good, good.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would also, Mitra, love to hear more about just your work and what your experience has been around political communications. Currently, you were formerly the director of communications at Ideas 42. I would love to
Mhm.
hear more about like what was that work like around narrowing the gender representation gap in politics, and then
Mhm.
also like why is that work so important?
Yeah. My work in politics was actually in Texas at a PAC called Annie's List,
Mhm.
and that work was specifically aimed at trying to get more women elected. So our mission and what I did day in and day out for years was work with a team of people who recruited women from local communities throughout Texas, asked them to run because there's an interesting fact that a lot of people don't know, but women need to be asked to run for office. And that's kind of a result of, unfortunately, the way that we're socialized. There's some research that shows that men are more likely to self-nominate for positions of power, and it's very similar to, I think, what many of us who have ever hired or gone through the job search process have experienced, where women will look at a job spec and say, I need to fit 90% or 100% of these qualifications to even put my name in for the job. Whereas a man will look at this and say, yeah, I could, probably fit 20% of this, and then I'll just wing it all the way through. And that's part of what adds up to kind of these gaps in terms of leadership and of course pay, but that's a separate thing. But that phenomenon happens in politics. So the organization that I worked for was modeled after one of the most well-known national organizations, Emily's List,
Mhm.
that exists solely to help reverse that. So in addition to making that ask to kind of nudge women into the process, because there are qualified, they're powerful, really smart, really passionate women everywhere. They are in your communities. They are doing all of this invisible work to keep communities strong and going. And they end up behind the scenes because, frankly, no one has encouraged them to step into the limelight and take a leadership position. So my work was focused on, trying to correct that, essentially. And we, after asking them and encouraging them, to become candidates, we did a lot of the other work that I think kind of prevents people from jumping into the race. And I'd also love to hear your perspective on this, which is, fundraising, getting enough capital to be taken seriously. So that's a lot of what we provided. And then, all the campaign support. So my specialty was actually communication support, messaging, prepping women for debates, prepping women for media, training women to talk to the media. I'm used to being behind the scenes, so it's unusual for me to actually be the person who is being interviewed. So this is exciting. but I had that, yeah.
I love that. No, Mitra, I'm so taken back. I admire your work and the importance of it. You said something that really resonated, and that was women have to be asked to run for office, right? It's the notion of, they again take on this sort of this belief system that they should not be, or why, or they're not qualified to be in those positions, in those roles, when in reality most women are already doing it. They're just not, they're just invisible, like you said, or they're behind the scenes. Mitra, I think about growing up and the women that sort of held our community together. They were the glue to our community. They were the ones speaking out. They were the ones in board meetings and community meetings and leading initiatives. And they were the ones that looked after our children, and they were in the ones at the schools making a difference. It really were the women, the moms. And to, when I think about it, they didn't have the formal authority. That's a Kennedy concept, right? They didn't have the formal authority, but they really did have the leadership, and they were exercising it in those moments. So to what you said, Mitra, is so powerful that a lot of women are doing the work, but they're invisible and they're behind the scenes. So speaking to the importance of the work that you've been doing.
Absolutely. And I can also tell you, not just at the kind of individual leadership perspective, but when you shift to think about what this kind of lack of female representation in political positions actually means for democracy, for our society, it's incredible, because women are half the population. And, without full representation, we can't truly have policy or society that represents the voices of that 50% of the population. And, I think any good policy student knows that a government that better reflects its population produces policies that reflect the priorities of that population, and not just a privileged few. But I think, for just an everyday kind of person wondering, why is my government not responsive to me? I think you have to take a really hard look at who's sitting at the table making those decisions. And when you have, an obvious gap of 50% of the population, that's not even getting to some of the other obvious kind of divisions within society, when you have very little diversity, very little representation of any voices other than just mainly one historically. We don't get policy that actually speaks to, the things that people care about in their communities. And of course, my experience has been working with women specifically. And, I know women focus on issues that do speak to all of that time that they put in at the schools, in their communities, checking in on people who happen to be sick. Women take up all of the care work that is invisible. So when women are given a seat at the decision-making table, then you see policy that tends to reflect better access to education, better access to healthcare, policies that take a more meaningful stab at reducing historical inequities and trying to arrive at some sense of kind of economic justice within this country. And then, of course, reproductive justice. Men can't regulate women's bodies. You need female voices to address those and make sure that the agenda actually reflects the needs of 50% of the population.
So well said, Mitra. Thank you so much for that well thought out, robust answer. I also want to move a little into the elections, given your work and all that you've been doing with getting women into leadership and sort of garnering women around being politically and civically engaged. Also, given your work with Ideas 42 and your background in behavioral science, I'm wondering if you can speak to what do you make of the coming election that's going to happen in 5 days or less, depending on what time when you're watching this, and how could this reshape? One, I want to understand from your perspective, how could this election reshape our communities, making it like plain families, schools, sort of what kind of effect might the outcome of this elections have on us that are listening and watching?
Yeah. That is the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? And I can take my stab as much as anyone can, right? So, irrespective of what the kind of outcome at the top of the ticket is with the presidential race, I can tell you that if we are able to succeed in closing some of the representation gaps across multiple levels, and again, focusing more on women first. If we see more women elected this cycle, I think we can expect to see more leaders who are more thorough in their approach to policymaking, who are more responsive to constituents' needs and engaged in more of those constituent services at home. Again, if school board level, city council level, county level, depending on where you are in the country, what kind of community you're in. Women tend to be, as a result of the way we're socialized, for better or for worse, work harder, more thorough, more detail oriented, and that translates to more productivity in policy making roles. So for constituents to feel like they're better represented, I say having more women in those positions is only going to help. And the other interesting thing about this that kind of goes a little bit more into the realm of like human behavior and psychology is that there's a lot of research that shows that women tend to, and of course, women are not a monolith. They are 50% of the population, but generally, women in elected office tend to prefer strategies of compromise. They tend to work more towards consensus. And they're also more likely to negotiate across party lines, which are all crucial pieces in kind of breaking the trend towards like serious partisan hostility and, just outright conflict that we've seen in years. And so I think that having more people at the table who are interested in returning to some of the periods in U.S. history in which we were able to accomplish more in terms of actual legislating and good governing and good governance, that we need more people who are willing to take on these strategies of like compromise and consensus oriented kind of approach to power.
That's it. Mitra, so many things you said that really stuck out to me. You talked about what it means for a woman to be elected, and we don't know what this election turnout will be as of yet. But we do know that when women are in office, like you mentioned, there are legislation around things that we care about, like better schools, more productivity, better legislation that reflects the population and the needs of the population. There's something else you said that I really wanted to hone in on, and that is the conflict and the division that our nation has been facing over the last, I'm not even sure how long, but it seems like it's gotten more contentious over the last 8 years or so, or coming to 8 years, and so polarized. We talked about this before we went live, but what does it mean, and how could our nation go back to working together across differences, across party lines, and put humanity at the center of our work and the center of what we do? And I think that's really what truly what policy and politics is, especially for those that are listening that may not be as politically sort of engaged, or may consider yourself to be as politically engaged. But politics and policy is really just about people and humanity, and making decisions for the betterment of humanity, to push humanity forward. And that does require us working together across party lines and respective of our differences. And so I really wanted to hone in on those points that you made.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you also like articulated that better than I ever could. So I will try to give you a good kind of follow up to that. So yeah, irrespective of who wins, I think you kind of, to build off of what you were saying, we've gotten caught up in what we would call kind of in group out group psychology, and it's also along kind of tribal thinking, and that is what is really divisive and negative, and that's part of what's driving a lot of this kind of animosity focus in the media and in our social feeds and what feels like everywhere. And I think you're right. It's hard to remember when this started. For me, it feels like it's been going on forever. I can't remember a time when we weren't covering this, but that's the power of this type of psychology.
Yeah.
And I think to break out of it, we'd have to shift. And by we, I mean, kind of the collective leadership, people involved in campaigns, in the media, community level organizations, any level of influence, influence even within your social circle, if it's an informal kind of source of authority, shift our messaging and our framing to, instead of tribal lines, a sense of us, and trying to kind of foster a positive shift towards some form of community. And what that can look like is different, and depending on, are we all Americans? Are we all New Yorkers? But whatever that is in your respective area, kind of starting to shift the messaging and shift our approach and our policies towards this more kind of unifying sense of us and sense of community.
Yeah. And it just made me think about, Mitra, the family, the children and the young people that are watching us. We're supposed to be like the role models, sort of paving the way for this generation, that's coming under us. I think about like the Alpha generation, which is the generation my daughter is of. And I wonder, are we setting a good example for the next generation? And what would it look like to set a better example for them?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I think those of us who are where we are in life, need to take a hard look at ourselves and think about the everyday small actions that we take without realizing it. Am I engaging in a social media post, driving it up in the algorithm that's surfacing something that is hateful or negative or divisive? And am I just helping to fuel all of this instead of focusing on something positive? And there's also, I think, a tendency to become very inward focused in times like this, which is leading to kind of a gap in civic participation. So I would say to any younger viewers who may be watching, or anyone who has children, civic engagement and civic participation is the other way that we need to really like focus to change this in the future.
Yes.
And I'm a former political consultant. I don't think anyone is more cynical than we are on Earth. So I get it. It's very difficult when you feel disengaged from the process to want to get engaged. But my advice would be, just get out there somewhere local in your community. Like go meet some volunteers. Go to like whatever the closest, smallest, if there's a school meeting, if there's a PTA meeting, Go
Yeah.
meet some local people and kind of absorb the passion that people have there, and like ask
Yeah.
them like what motivates you to give of your like limited time in between, feeding your kids, commuting to work, balancing everything you have to balance. Like, where do you find it in yourself to take this precious time and like help your community? I find that those conversations are incredibly contagious and incredibly energizing, and then that has like a massive kind of ripple effect starting at like the most grassroots level.
Oh my goodness, Mitra. I mean, I had so many moments in my mind that I was thinking of when you were speaking, and you're absolutely correct. Um, you brought it back so nicely to civic engagement and talked about like preparing the next generation. How do we do that? We do start through civic engagement. And what does it look like? We hear this fancy term. It just means getting involved, being engaged in what's going on in your community for the betterment, like Mitra said. Whether it's going to a local school board meeting or going to your community board meeting, just being engaged and involved in what's going on. I also like to ask people, like, do you know who your state representative is? Do you know what district you live in? Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. So many people are like, I think I'm in community, but I'm in this district. It just, you have so much more power than you think you do. And I think, Misha, a lot of people have lost hope. They
Mm.
have lost trust that things will change. They've lost trust that our leaders or leaders that are leading us have our best interests. But the thing is, we can, as a collective, start to change that narrative by being engaged, by placing the accountability back on our leaders, by rising to leadership. If there's opportunities, as Mitra nicely does with the woman that she works with. But the heart of the matter is we have a right and we have a voice, and there's power in our action. And so it's easier to sit back and to complain, all right, and to analyze the problem from the outside. And I think, Mitra, you talked about, I can't remember the terminology, but it was like it was an inward sort of shift. That when things we have a tendency to sort of look inward, as opposed to being engaged outwardly. But what the matter is, we want you to be engaged. It is important to be engaged. You have stake in your community. You have a voice, and it matters.
Absolutely, yes. 100% 5-star endorsement. One other thing I would add to that too is you know if you feel like your voice doesn't matter, beyond taking all of these incredible steps to get involved in leadership at every level of the process, because if you make a positive impact on one person, that is one person who can then, it's a multiplier effect, impact another person, and that's fantastic. But back to even like casting a ballot, I know
Yes.
it's super easy to get caught up in, those of us who live in states where it feels like we don't matter because it's definitely going to go one way or it's definitely going to go the other way. All of the oxygen gets sucked up going into the swing states. But again, I
Yeah.
want to pull it back down to a theme that we've been talking about here, which is like the local level.
Yeah.
Trust me, when you get to the council level, the state house level, dozens of other races lower on the ballot that actually impact your daily life much more,
Yes.
those
Yeah.
races are so competitive that they are just like decided by hundreds of votes, dozens, sometimes
Mhm.
even two. So
Yeah.
if you think your vote doesn't matter, I would look a little bit further down the ballot, and you could be the decision point between this candidate and that candidate.
That's so good. So good, Mitra. And yours is coming from a former candidate. Myself, I fully endorse that statement. Especially again, those local elections, like Mitra said, going down on the ballot, looking at those local elections, state elections, they really do determine the quality of your neighborhoods, the safety, the quality of your schools, the quality of your life. Marcus, there's so much that's determined by who leads in your community. And, as Mitra put it, and sort of why we're doing this fireside is we do believe, we do want you to go out there and cast your ballot, You have something so powerful in your hands, and that's the ability to go out and to vote for those that are eligible too. And we are urging you to exercise your right, your power, your stake in this, to help determine the fate of your community, the state of our, essentially, of our world, of our society.
Mhm.
Mitra, I know we're coming to a close, but I would love to give you closing remarks. Also, how can people reach you if they're interested in learning more about your work? And then any last words around getting out to vote?
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me. I think this conversation is super important. We need to have 50 more of these and have everyone watch conversations like this and like have conversations about this with other people in your lives.
Yeah.
The social contagion effect is real. You can inspire people in your life to become more civically active and to start to care about the issues that you care about, and also inspire them to think about what are the issues that they care about. And then that is how power is built. That is how movements are built. So that would probably be my closing remark. But just echoing, absolutely get on and vote. I think early vote runs through the end of Saturday.
Yeah.
And then of course election day is coming very quickly. And I would say if you're not sure where your polling place is, the best resource, given that we may have people watching from all over, would be vote.org. Short and sweet, vote.org. Enter your information. You can find where your polling place is, whether it's different on early voting day, or the actual election day on Tuesday. So you can get all the information that you need there. And in terms of myself, I think that the best place to stay connected to what I'm doing would be through LinkedIn. I am still, part of the reason I'm at the Kennedy School is to kind of refine what's going on in the future. So I'd love to stay connected via LinkedIn, and I think we'll be sharing a link if people are interested in staying connected. So that's probably the best place.
This is so incredible. I just want to, just one more question, Mitra, as we're
Yeah.
closing. Is there anything, I think some people, when they're going to vote, or I think there's sometimes a fear or hesitation around it. Is there anything people should know prior to going out to vote, in terms of like looking up their poll sites or ID or not ID, or just those details?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So polling locations and the rules in terms of how far they are, when what their opening hours are, they're going to vary by county level, in some places state level, precinct level. So looking online at a trusted resource is your best bet. Start with vote.org. If you're confused, I would Google the Secretary of State for your specific state. Because to be honest, some states have a different approach to voting access than others, and we can't pretend that they're all the same. So you want to make sure that you're looking for, if you live in New York, look for New York-based rules. If you live in Texas, look for Texas-based rules. And I also find that it's helpful to take a friend to the polls, take a family member to the polls. They can help, especially if it's your first time voting. Voting is everything about it up till the moment you get the ballot is nerve-wracking. Then you get the ballot and it's easy, smooth sailing from there. You can't go wrong. You made it there, and that's the battle. So bringing someone with you as an accountability buddy, and to help make sure that you actually make it there. And if you haven't, make a plan to vote with the person you're going to go with. And I mean specifically, like, say we're going to go Saturday at 11 a.m. and this is how we're going to get there. That's the behavioral science in me. Making a plan has been shown to actually increase the likelihood that you will follow through on something. But most importantly, voting is your right. Voting is something that we all are able to do to exercise our voice. So I think it's important to remember you belong in that polling place. You belong there to cast your ballot. So, go forth and use your voice.
Yes, I love it, Mitra. I'm so excited. I want to go right now. Oh, that was great. Thanks, Mitra. Yes, go forth and use your voice. You belong in the polls. And don't forget to get your sticker and take a selfie and hashtag it once you do. That's one of my faves. And I always like to take my daughter, and she always gets like future voter sticker, and we take one selfie together. But
Oh, I love
Mitra, this, yes, this has been so incredible. I just want to thank you so much for your work, for your passion, for your commitment to closing the gap and to getting more women elected in office. Thank you for all that you're doing, and I'm excited that we're together at Kennedy School. I look forward to what you'll do in the coming weeks, coming months, and coming years. We'll see each other soon, I'm sure, in
Yeah.
class. But for everyone else, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate your time, for sticking in with us. Do us a favor, as Mitra said, there should be 50 of these, but there isn't. So we can make it more by resharing this, whether you're watching on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. Help us to uplift this conversation by sharing it out to a friend, to a colleague, to someone that you care about, to someone that you know, so that we can get the message out. We want to remind you that your voice is important and that it is absolutely powerful. We will be back in 2 weeks. We'll be debriefing the elections, hopefully with great news and talking about where do we go from here. Thank you all again for